all set for our discussion with our technology leaders, emerging technologies such as IoT, AI, ML, 5G and virtualization. What does the future look like? I'll be joined by our moderator, Mr. Anuj Kumar, Director, KPMG India. We also have on the panel Mr. Sreeji Gopinathan, Global CIO Lupin. A very warm welcome to Mr. Vasudev Sharma, Vice President, Platform Engineering, Upstocks. May I also present to you Mr. Vinod Bhatt, CIO, Vistara, Tata SA Airlines. May I extend a very warm welcome to Mr. Chandra Kanduja, CIO, Luminous. A very warm welcome to Mr. Bharat Yagagati, Vice President, Customer Engineering, Nevis Solutions. As we look forward to this very interesting session, we will soon be joined by Mr. Atul Kumar, General Manager, Digital Banking, Canara Bank. For now, let's head to this very interesting discussion. All thanks to our moderator, Mr. Anuj Kumar.
Hi, everyone. A very good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining in. I'm pleased to welcome our esteemed panelists here for a very interesting chat and session on emerging technologies and how they're being leveraged in the world of data center. And we will touch upon some key themes with our esteemed panelists. And I would like to start by just setting some context, as all of us know that the pandemic has really accelerated digitalization and digital transformation, which has also fueled the ever-increasing need for infrastructure. So whether it's remote management, which is enabled by automation, machine learning, having an off-hands infrastructure, which the pandemic really put a lot of impetus on, as everything was to be done remotely. Whether it's having abilities to discover and map your infrastructure components using graph technologies, having a better view of your failure points, whether it's the movement to the cloud, or whether it's traditional data centers, providing and also embarking on pay-as-you-go models. The emergence of AI, Industry 4.0, IoT, and 5G is also giving an increasing importance to edge computing and likely shift to decentralization of these compute. And finally, globally, the focus on sustainability and decarbonization. So we will touch upon some of these themes along with our panelists. And I welcome all of them. Thank you so much for taking out time. Now, to kickstart, I would request Shriji and maybe Chandra to throw some light on their views on what are the key emerging technologies that are making impact in the data center management world, and which ones are actually delivering maximum benefits.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks, Anuj, for the question, and thanks for having me here. Yeah, so, as we all know, as you have said, the context, the pandemic has been a sort of an accelerator for the digitalization journey and the digital transformation journey, which means the amount of data that is getting generated on a per second basis, which then needs to be made sense out of, has gone really skyrocketed. I think it's probably more than 10 million gigabytes per second sort of generation that is per minute sort of second generation that is happening. And how do you really store it? How do you really store it in such a way that it is available? How do you then make use cases around that which can actually benefit the business and get the actual outcomes to impact whoever the stakeholders are, whether it's consumers, customers, distributors, our own stakeholders, etc. So these are the kind of challenges that is facing us, and anybody who already has the power to shift the way we do business into completely another level, right? So that's the context. Basically, if you really look at some of the foundation technology which is emerging, other than the usual things like storage and virtualization, you also talked about computing, AI, ML, automation. One thing which is becoming more and more important is sort of intelligent monitoring, in my opinion. And when I say intelligent, that the infra alone is not in the scheme of things, but it's the end-to-end that we expect out of these solutions that we have deployed is going to be absolutely crucial, because the services that we deliver is actually touching our end consumers, and sometimes in our case it could be a patient, it could be a doctor, in financial services it could be someone else. So these intelligent monitoring, where we can bring in a proactive way of managing the availability and creating a seamless user experience, so that they can stick to our services and see the value that we are delivering to them. And the foundation for this is whatever form of data center that we're talking about. It could be cloud, it could be on-prem, it could be edge, whatever it is, so that we hit issues is I think something which is emerging. People are starting to talk about. We are discussing. I'm hearing this from service providers. So this is an area to watch. And I think as CIOs, as IT professionals, as we have sort of become the center of a lot of the work that is happening in our companies, this demand is going to be automatically coming onto us, and hence we have to preempt and work towards that. Now, of course, there are other emerging technologies which is going to have an impact as well, like 5G. We are already talking about 6G, right? And in multiple areas we have talked about AI, ML, advanced analytics, predictive maintenance, prescriptive ways of managing manufacturing operations, or a sales operation on the ground. How do we provide nudges to them? So as you can imagine here, the layered architecture that we'll have in terms of the sources of the data, and then the data acquisition platforms, and then we have the edge computing, where the action needs to be taken as quickly as possible, so that you can influence the outcome that you want right now, rather than having that data travel all the way to your data lake, which might take a few hours before you can run the algo and bring it back. That edge computing algos, and then taking the data back to wherever you want, the data lake or whatever, so that you can have an historical data analytics, which can then be taken back to your business processes to make an impact. So I think this area is very busy now. A lot of activities going on, and I'm sure most of my colleagues here in the discussion also will have lots to share.
Thank you, Sreeji, for those interesting points, and you touched upon a lot of things. But I would request Chandra for his thoughts on one very important aspect that you mentioned, that a lot of these services which are relying on your data centers, whatever that infrastructure is, are really critical services. And you touched upon the importance of intelligent monitoring. So Mr. Chandra, in your experience, how are these intelligent monitoring capabilities being enabled? Are we at the stage of cutting edge AI ML, or we are still doing more rule-based monitoring? What have you seen in your experience?
So I've seen now, in at least last 2 years, we have seen people have were earlier focusing on infrastructure as a service. So it was more of on a cloud journeys were evolving around how you have your infrastructure hosted in cloud and what kind of technologies you're deploying, whether intelligent monitoring in place, AI, ML, or you're doing log monitoring through a usual log monitoring way, or you're putting in an AI engine or ML engine which will read the logs and act upon it. So I think the journey has gone beyond this in last 2 years at least, where people have started talking about how your cloud journey can help in innovation. So it is beyond now. It is given. Everyone has seen what happened last 2 years, and so it's given IaaS information, your infrastructure as service. Is people are done and dusted, and they have taken call. But more mature companies which were already in cloud have moved and started developing a lot of innovative solutions around cloud, and I think a lot of services, microservices. How do you ensure that your hyperscalers are kind of you're having a hybrid kind of infrastructure? How you are able to interact and develop innovative solutions for your customers, for your employees, and for your I would say all the relevant stakeholders. So this, I would say, innovation. Whether if you're talking about IoT, some started using IoT hubs, how you are interacting your IoT hubs which are on cloud on a different platform, which is on a different hyperscaler. How do you do that? How do you interact with for someone who's giving you a remote service? So are you able to provide them innovation on anytime and anywhere, and on demand? I think that is where entire movement has moved into. So infrastructure is a given thing. Everyone's workloads increase during cloud, and being on cloud, it helped people to kind of scale up and pretty fast. So but what is the next journey? Are you able to get various solutions, whether they are on AI or ML or your big data analytics or your industry 4.0? Are you able to focus on those journeys? I think that is where CIOs are pointing to now. And I think going forward, I see this journey to get further impetus in I would say next 2 years from now. Like in my case, I can talk about my workloads were almost 70% pre-COVID, and now I'm already on 90-95%. My workloads have moved to cloud. Even ERP companies have started talking about becoming a true cloud companies. I'm saying bigger giants are talking about we might not sell on-prem licenses. So this is where even industry is taking shift. So the smart CIOs see this trend, and they do a first movers advantage. Though in technologies, they sometimes say probably we become kind of a guinea pigs, but I see a lot of advantage once you take calls faster, and that help you during uncertain times. I think this is where my point of view is there.
Very interesting points that you mentioned, Chandar, and I think that kind of brings us to the fact that cloud is definitely here when you mentioned from 70% to 95%. Then let me then bring in Vinod here to to address the second question that I had in my mind, which was, given this increasing shift and investments in cloud infrastructure, and as Chandar also mentioned and Sreeji also alluded to, that workloads increasingly moving to cloud. Do you really see the data center the traditional way it has been even surviving? And therefore, the potential of investments that you make into these technologies to support these data centers, do you see that will in the long term that will still be there? There would still be room to do that?
Okay, thank you, Anuj, for having me. It's great to be part of this discussion. I think Mr. Gopinathan and Mr. Chandra also alluded to, I would say, an evolving scenario, particularly last 2 years we have been talking about. So I will step back before I can answer what will potentially happen to the data centers and the cloud. I think let's look at how pandemic, how technologies are impacting the business. I think we need to just wear that business hat for a moment before we start solutioning it. Because every business is different, every business has objectives, every business has certain KPIs to monitor. So the examples can be that my business has to be resilient, it has to be secured, it has to be cost conscious, and what is the right value of cost value equation. I think if you keep that in mind, then you look at it what I have got today in house. And yes, if I have to broad statement, I have to make probably every organization will move towards cloud because of it gives you scale, it gives you paper service, it gives you a lot of stuff. But then you need to also look at that from your regulatory compliance perspective, from your data perspective, that how much that is actually a tick mark. Because let's keep in mind that these cloud partners are also evolving. If you look at the native capabilities which the cloud platforms are building, it is actually every month you see an increase. So we need to see that, we need to marry that what is required for you and what is that you can put on the public cloud, what is still can be in your data centers. And if your business is demanding that you need to do some computing, edge computing, also where you can't wait, you need to do the real time, yes, you may have to go for the data centers which are close to the edge. You may have to do some pilots in 5G, and also work with the OEMs who are actually providing hardware, because it is not only about the bandwidth, it's also about the hardware, about the network which is going to support the technology. And then yes, data is everywhere, absolutely. So AI will play a role. So from journey point of view, I would say that you need to look at data center as it is. It will not stay. It will not stay where you are. The only thing is the direction you need to take, whether you want to see co-location may be a good interim solution, that you don't want to invest in a large data center. You can actually co-locate, pay, use the services what they're providing you, and parallelly probably chalk out a strategy for your cloud journey and start moving the workloads there, compare the cost, compare the compliance, and start educating business also. Because what is happening, which critical apps you want to move on the cloud. I think those decisions you cannot take alone. There will be pros and cons. There will be user base, there will be security. Plus, I'm talking about data security, I'm talking about cyber security, I'm talking about the GDPR and other compliance we're talking about. So I think those are the things which you need to consider while you are moving the workloads or the journey towards cloud. But I believe that it's an interim situation right now. I don't think data centers are going to go away completely. They may still exist for a specific purpose, for a specific business. But some of the businesses may be completely doing away with data centers or on cloud. For example, airlines were all completely on cloud from last 6 years. But having said that, will data centers exist? I think the answer will be yes. But why to keep a watch on these emerging technologies? I think it's very important to see the relevance of these technologies for us. See, we're talking about AI, in a broader sense. But when you look at AI, where are you going to use in the data center context? AI, you will probably use the analytics. You will use the data for maybe the remote monitoring. You will use the trends. You may use for maintenance, for cooling. I think those are the things you need to see there, how to use those technologies and use the data more moving from a reactive to a proactive pattern. So that you have the data, but you analyze it probably 3 years later, or you analyze 2 days later. So it doesn't make any sense. So data becomes stale and your decisions also become stale. So I will take a pause here. I know there are many people who want to contribute.
So thank you, Vinod, for bringing us back to a very fundamental point that while cloud definitely offers you the flexibility and cost advantages, but it's equally important to continue to look at which business I am in, which industry I am in, and therefore take a conscious call, or even considering the environment and ecosystem that I operate in, to continue to invest in some of the capabilities which would help aid that. But just to sort of complete the loop, let me come back to Vasudev as well. So Vasudev, given that many cloud native organizations, who were actually born in the cloud itself, how are they responding to that? What technologies are you using, for example, within your cloud infrastructure to manage it better? Given the fact that the cloud providers would already provide a lot of those out of the box, right? So is that sufficient in itself, or you still need another layer of investments that need to happen on top of even your cloud infrastructure to make it function better?
Anuj, thank you for this question. A great question, by the way. Anuj, if you look at this holistically, right? I mean, for companies who are born in cloud, for the modern companies, the problem is pretty straightforward. They rarely have to go to a data center, especially unless until there's a regulatory reasons. For them the path is pretty straightforward. However, for companies like us, upstarts, right? We have evolved from a data center model, and not only upstarts, a lot of banking, a lot of financial services. These companies, had it been so easy to move out of data center, we would have already moved out of it. Most of the companies are at 90-95% coverage in terms of moving out of data centers. What Vinod said, right? It's a really important point to understand. What I think we are at the interim where the whole transition is happening. We started with the point where the service providers, the infrastructure service providers they started giving out things. And then we are at a stage right now where we are at a point where we are thinking of moving the last 5% bit of our infrastructure into the cloud. However, there are a few things which are really important for us to understand when we look at this overall. First of all, for new businesses, as you said, it's straightforward. Unless there are regulatory reasons, there are compliance reasons. For old businesses, there'll be a huge challenge, especially there are a lot of legacy code something which is running on a system which is 10-15-year-old hardware, which is anyway very difficult to support. Let them migrate. So that's a whole different challenge. Once we have those kind of problems, it becomes near impossible unless you rewrite the whole or redesign the whole infrastructure. And with that, there are other things, right? So the way I see things, which I think already a bunch of providers are also doing, there'll be a hybrid model where specialized boxes, something like AWS Outpost, will be used where you have a step, you move into the Outpost, and then as a next step, you move into completely SaaS-based solution. However, this is not happening for next few years. This is definitely not happening for next few years. And one thing that pandemic really showed us, right, is how dependent are we on the underlying infrastructure. A lot of companies, they had to scale up really, really fast. Something that even AWS could not keep up. Like we had to give them a notice a month in advance where we were planning to scale up. That's the level of scale we were seeing. And with data centers, if you already have a capacity, it's very easy to manage cost. It's almost very cheap, especially with amortization. You can divide the cost in 3 years. It's as long as you're upfront ready to invest in it. That's the one thing. But yeah, as I said, right, depends on a very business-centric decisions. What you have to give back as a value to your investors, to the founders, to of course the community. That purely depends on the direction that you want to choose.
Thanks, Vasudev. I think a very one point that I could clearly pick up on was the amount of effort that may be required for anyone to even transition to cloud, or in certain cases because of regulatory pressures to move it back into in-house data centers, is the whole aspect of how do you transition or how do you migrate those workloads, and how some of these emerging technologies can really help you accelerate that whole transition. That's really important. So let me come to Bharat now. Bharat, what are you seeing, being from the provider side, whether you look at in-house data centers or cloud infrastructures, what are the low-hanging fruits or low-hanging areas where organizations can leverage automation or AI/ML capabilities, and what kind of capabilities do you see clients leveraging?
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks for that, Anuj. So in our experience, right, I was the other day talking to one of the customers, right, whose top line is in $1 billion. They have about 1 lakh plus employees, right? But the sad truth was they have only around 5 ML, which they were able to take it into production, right? So you look at the size, look at the top line, and look at the actual ML or AI algorithms that they're using, which are in production line, right? So it's understood that for traditional companies or for even large enterprises and corporates, it's very difficult to implement AI ML. While most of them are definitely investing, they're exploring this whole thing, but the implementation becomes a challenge because of the organizational challenge, the cultural challenges, right? But on the other side, you look at all the emerging companies. You can talk about Airbnb or Netflix or Instagram or Uber. They were all born into this AI ML, right? A large part of their disruptive success is based on their ability to tap into this AI ML in order to transform how they service their customers how they transform their operations as well as their growth. Right. So looking into that, when we start talking about the key hanging, or rather the low hanging fruits, which within the AI/ML, which enterprises and corporates can start exploring, I'd like to start with the churn prediction. Right. Churn customer refers to the amount of customers who would end up staying back or who are probable to leave you. Right. So there are a lot of predetermined AI/ML models available with a lot of CSPs, which can be leveraged in a more of a plug and play model to enhance your predictability of who's going to leave you, right? It's always difficult or more costly affair to add new customers, but how can you get the best out of your existing customers is what generates your massive revenue, right? So that's one area. Coming into retail, I would look into the inventory optimization space, right? So inventory optimization in predominantly three areas, right? One is
Bharat, maybe a pause there. See, anything that our panelists or users could take from you more on the infrastructure side, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say from a cloud management or a data center technologies point of view, are there areas where AI/ML could play a role, or it could be the typical automation areas, or as Sreeji earlier mentioned, intelligent monitoring aspects? Are you seeing any uptake of AI/ML there?
Yeah, absolutely right. So these are some of the areas where it could be inventory optimization, or it could be even product recommendations, right? How do I take it? Like, see, a lot of these CSPs and come with a lot of pre AI/ML models, right? Which, for example, if I were to take about recommendation, right? So recommendations, an example is Google Cloud has been using recommendations as a part of their YouTube, their Google Ads, everything from ages, and now they have built it into a completely managed service called Recommendation AI, which you can plug and start using irrespective of whether your data is on your data centers or on cloud, right? So that is one area where you can start, where you don't have to have a data science team or data scientists sitting there to do a lot of heavy lifting. These are all modeled ML algorithms available in a plug and play model. Right. Another area which I can focus on is the document AI, right? Doc AI, like you call it. I mean, irrespective of the industry, there's a lot of documents that needs to be processed. So the OCR capabilities, in fact, we have implemented this for a lot of our banks, right? So the whole customer experience has been enhanced by using OCR technologies, where you just scan your Aadhaar, scan your PAN, and all your details are already captured. This is a existing document AI from Google Cloud, right? We're using Vision API, and your onboarding can be completed in flat 3 minutes. Right. So now banks, like you say, there is a hybrid model. They have a lot of data on the data centers because of the regulations from the RBI, customer data not existing on cloud and things like that. But however, we are able to build these applications, right, for the onboarding, etc., on cloud and interact with the applications which are hosted or the data which is there on the data center in order to bring in this hybrid model, but leveraging AI and ML technologies.
Thank you, Bharat, for highlighting some of these areas as well. Now coming back to Chandar and Sreeji again, so you spoke about, let's say, transitioning to cloud, which gives you the flexibility, which gives you obviously cost advantages, pay as you go models. So are there other factors also which are driving this adoption of emerging technologies within data center or cloud? So is it because of decarbonization? Is it the reliability factor? Is it resiliency, as Northern Vasudev also touched upon? What are the other factors that are actually making organizations to use some of these emerging technologies, for infrastructure management?
Okay, so let me go first on this. Once you start looking at a technology, there are various aspects. I think the decision making is whether it's cloud, no cloud. The decision making process for any CIO does not change. One thing is, how does it impact your business? Do you have a right kind of flexibility, scalability, availability, and affordability? I think for any technology decision, so let us be very honest, these parameters don't change. Only thing is, cloud has further given impetus to, and obviously the scenario around us has started, there are external environmental factors also which play a very important role. So if we look at the decision we are taking, so we see a large role coming from external environment factors, from going from 60-70% to 95%, that end 25%. And I'm telling you now, a lot of promoter-driven companies have earlier, they were very many promoters keep on speaking to me. They were very kind of touchy about, no, I can't move data out of my data center. But now they're talking a different language altogether, whereby now they say, no, I need to ensure that my business should not suffer. And I have, so I give you a very classical example, like I am a manufacturing company and we are yet not open. The reason is the cloud innovative tools. I'm not an IT company. I'm a manufacturing company because we have developed a lot of innovative solutions around cloud, whether now even moving our ERP on SAP Rise was I'd say it's a new technology, just came into India 8 or 9 months back, but we are the early starters to move entire our workloads on SAP Rise. The reason is we are seeing very clearly we need to focus on customer delight. We need to focus on availability of systems for business growth. And also we need to ensure that we have the best of technology class available to us. And security plays a very important role. So I think we trust on these cloud service providers because otherwise day-to-day battles with security are also a huge challenge, which we need to fight every day. So I think from endpoint security, we know that those challenges, at least from application perspective, we are feel a little bit more safer once we have those certifications available with cloud service providers. So I think this is what we are aiming at, and I agree it depends upon business to business, how do they look at it. But I think technology decisions in terms of agility and scalability makes the case in favor of cloud.
Sreeji, any thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, I agree with Chandra that the fundamentals doesn't change, and I also have to say that it is not automatically a cloud unless strategy, and I think we have moved on from that cloud unless strategy. The decisions have to be taken based on different parameters, like what is the business objective that we are trying to achieve? What is the cost of moving to cloud versus hosting otherwise? Do I keep storage also in the cloud, or do I dually compute? Do I need faster decision making nearer to where the action is? So then I have to decentralize and have edge computing, as well in the architecture. So there are multiple parameters. Business continuity, security, he already talked about. So there are multiple parameters that you look at and then say this workload 100% it makes sense to take it to the cloud. For example, let's say there is a large ecosystem of people, whether it is consumers, patients, doctors, people who want financial services, insurance services, Uber and Ola type of, Zomato, Swiggy type of services that is to be available to a large number of people. I mean, there is no discussion, right? These has to reside in the cloud. But when it comes to financial services or pharma like ours, where there are a lot of other factors to be considered in terms of not only regulatory and compliance, but also certain other internal reasons that we consider, we might have to take a call. In addition to the cloud and the edge, there is actually a need for this particular workload to be in our data center, not even co-location, right? So those calls are made, based on a detailed analysis of what workload are we talking about, what is the business objective that we are trying to achieve, what is the risk that we are trying to manage, and what is the cost of serving that. So that's how I go about doing it, and I think this is now the approach that a lot of the people are looking at as well. There was a time phase, I think, probably 2-3 years ago, everybody was looking at cloud unless strategy. And cloud, of course, scalability, agility, all those things, and manageability, progressive improvements in the technologies, fast-paced technology that is bringing to the progressive improvements in the compute and the storage. All those are, automatic benefits that you get when you move to cloud. There are certain cases where we cannot do it, and we take that call based on the parameters that I talked about.
Thank you, Sreeji, Chandra. I think two critical points that both of you mentioned there. One for me was, that it's very workload to workload basis decision making as well. And second is that the fundamental tenets that you use for making the technology choices, apply very well to the decision making in emerging technologies, whether it's in data center or whether it's in the cloud. Now, coming to Vinod and Vasudev, I think given the points that Chandan and Sreeji mentioned that helps in decision making, but are you also seeing some key challenges and impediments that are impacting the adoption of these technologies? How critical is ROI, or are there other benefits that outweigh ROI when you've made those decisions?
Yeah, probably I'll start. See, I will probably also give a different flavor from impediments point of view. See, it is, I said in the first point, that it's a journey. So, and it varies from the maturity of the organization also, that how open they are open for the change. Because asking someone to move from BAU to a different architecture because of whatever reasons, maybe cost, maybe resilience, adaptability, I think that will be a groundwork which has to be done by the tech leaders, and talking about the benefits it's going to give, and also getting that right message through the town halls, through the trainings, getting the right ambassadors. I would say that you need to have, it's beyond an IT change, it's also the change which you want to drive across the departments, across the divisions of the organization. I think that is number one. I believe that that's very important for from making sure that this adoption goes through. Second is, the change which we are doing should not be done in one go, because you need to show them the incremental values, you need to show them the incremental progress, you need to de-risk the business, you need to come up with that plan and get them on your side of the table. I think that is the second part of it. It's not only awareness, but also building an incremental plan where you get the stakeholders, and it needs a lot of diligence, because you need to put 2-3 people in a box kind of approach, where you say that business, IT, and process person is going to drive it. And they repeatedly come back and talk about the progress. They repeatedly come back and say the challenges. They repeatedly come back and say there's a risk. And taking those decisions in those governance meetings and celebrating the success also. Maybe if somebody has, I think classic example is that if you are having 100 servers which you have provisioned, and now through software-defined data centers, you can do a lot of virtualization. You don't have to do that, and you can show to the management that you can actually save maybe 50% of that cost on monthly basis. So I think those are the things where they will like it, love it, and if there is any fluctuation in the demand and supply, showing them how our business could adapt to those changes, market changes, regulatory changes on the fly, while not compromising on the security. I would say it will go a long way, and which will make your, I would say, transition a little bit smoother and address some of the challenges which are around the people, process, and technology.
Thanks, Vinod. I think the upfront aspect of change management that you highlighted, with a very interesting facet of 3 in a box, putting all the key stakeholders together, a lot of interesting facet to be thought of. Vasudev, any thoughts from your side, what you are seeing in terms of adoption and any challenges beyond ROI that would impact these cases?
Certainly. So if you look at adoption, right, this is a very tech-driven decision. It's not something that business would care about. Honestly, my bosses, they don't care about, as long as they get the stability, they get the security and scalability. That's what they look at. Okay, that the uptime and the latency is what matters to them. What also they want is business continuity. One of the things that going on a SaaS platform or infrastructure as a service platform, right, it guarantees, or at least the overall business continuity is very de-risked. Okay, now for my bosses, that's important. Okay, the moment they ask me, how do you make sure that no matter what happens, we do not go down? One of the key things that comes to my mind is making sure my infrastructure does not go down. Okay, so for me, business continuity is how I sell this to my senior management. And once you sell this to your leadership, right, then everything is easy. Not only that, the second part is getting the right people. Okay. One of the key changes that I'm seeing while hiring, hiring has been a big challenge, especially during the pandemic, is getting the people who want to continue working on data centers. Right? People want to upgrade themselves. That's again a key challenge. That's also something that engineers love to do. Right? right? They want to move to newer aspects of tech. Now, this is something that's good in general, because you want to move to latest tech. The new hires want to move to the latest tech. That kind of de-risk the overall business and engineering for us. However, as Vinod and everybody said, right, it's a step-by-step process. We are at the middle of a big change happening. What I see is step 1.5 where we are. 1.5 is move to a hybrid model, and then it will be a complete model when our compliances are much more forgiving, when our regulatories are much more compliant with our requirements rather than the other way around. Yeah, I think this is there. This is going to happen, and it's important that we educate the businesses, the leadership of how this has to happen.
Thanks, Vasudev. I think fascinating to see the words ROI being replaced by the importance of continuity, resilience, and more applying to almost all the businesses, not only just cloud-based businesses. Coming to Vinod and Sreeji, now are these investments then also adding, especially given your industries, adding to the compliance and trust burden? Given the regulatory framework, the requirements around compliance, as data centers become more hands-off, with the use of these technologies, are these technologies also creating a safety issue, a zero trust issue?
I think even the regulators are becoming a lot more affable to technology and the benefits that it is bringing. At least, in the sector that I work in, I can see that happening. I think in financial also, I think it is happening. So that there are many instances where there have been guidelines issued as well in terms of leveraging technology and making the processes better and in a stronger, more reliable, as opposed to a very restrictive thought process which used to be there in the past. However, having said that, at the end of the day, it is our responsibility to make sure that the foundation of what is needed to produce non-compromising quality of medicine, that is the foundation of everything that we do, right? So wherever we have the workloads, wherever the technologies are going to be, at the end of the day, that's what the regulators are interested in. Now, there is a lot of co-thought processes and co-discussions that is happening. What are the areas that we can look at without really having to be in a restrictive thought process? Simple things like the computer system validation that, which is very, very high important aspect in the pharma industry. It used to be a very manual process in the past, but there have been very good conversations where we said automation is possible in that as well. But then, we do have proper checks and balances to make sure that whatever we do there goes through that rigorous checks before we say, yeah, it is validated and it is passed. And even there is now discussions happening, guidelines, the official guidelines, not draft guidelines, not the final guidelines. Draft guidelines have been issued where the regulators are talking about moving from a computer system validation to a computer system assurance. So if you have to go to a computer system assurance, then automation is absolutely key. That means you are ready anytime, whenever you want to check or audit or whatever, you are ready anytime. There is no other way. So automation and technology leverage, is going to be the way to go for this. Now, if I take a little bit of different flavor on how do I provide connectivity to my partner ecosystem, whether it is my CFA or whether it is my supplier or co-manufacturer or whatever, then there are a lot of concerns on how we do that, especially in the heightened security world that we are living in currently. So there's a lot of emphasis put on how do we provide secure connectivity to them so that they see what they see and they see only what they want to see. And they only what they should be seeing, and restricting any sort of lateral connections and movements that can arise out of that. So that trust-based or zero trust-based mechanisms are leveraged more and more when we provide entry points into external partners who are crucial for our business and the way we do business, but very, very controlled manner. So it's a forward-looking, progressive journey. I think that is happening. but in a very controlled manner because of the regulatory aspects and because of concerns around the health and other aspects around this.
Vinod, any thoughts?
I think Mr. Gopinathan summarized it well. So in a regulated industry, your actions cannot be one-sided. So if you just place yourself in the middle, where on one hand there are business 4.0, industry 4.0, technology, IoT, 5G, AI, ML. On the right hand side, you have got the regulators. So it is the job of the CIOs to make sure that the technology which are prone. Second is, I would add a word, audit and compliance. So it's not only compliance, you need to have the evidence, documentary proof. That's what the regulatory bodies will ask you. That in terms of whether the logging, whether the data protection, everything is controlled. So and all these government bodies, regulators, they are actually also going through the journey because they have been living this manual processes for ages. And to educate them, tell them along with the service providers and getting an okay with the right evidences, I think those things are happening. And whether it's through automation, whether they want to, the workflows getting automated, the trainings getting automated, certificates getting automated. So it will go through, and we cannot, though the technology may be very good, and we know that it will work, but you will have to go through the process and make sure that the process which has more exposure from the risk perspective, particularly the customer data and all, that will probably take a lot more scrutiny versus a simple automation process, which is just a data capture, but still a regulatory requirement. So yes, it will be a journey, and I think next 2 years, probably it will be a lot more on the acceleration path.
Thank you, Vinod. I think we are pretty close to the closure of our session. Maybe probably the last 4 to 5 minutes, and I just want to take it towards conclusion for the benefit of our audience as well. So, what would be, let's say, one thing that you would recommend to your peers, and I request everyone's view here. Maybe you could spend, keep it brief, keep within 30 seconds if you could spend based on your experience. So what is the one thing that you would recommend your peers to focus their energies on? What will be really critical in your view in the next 3 to 5 years in this space? And we could start with Chandar, and I can then call out names.
I think it's very, very important to be proactive and have one mantra. Only uncertainty is the certainty. I think that if you have this mantra for any decision making, so that will help you in kind of taking right calls. So always have this as a mantra. I use it as this as a mantra, and I think it has worked for me. But so I thought probably someone wants to have that perspective, they may look at it.
Sreeji?
I would say stick to the fundamentals, understand what your business is all about, what the objectives are, what the goals are, and then keep track of what the technology, progress is that is going on, and take a decision based on the different parameters that I mentioned about earlier. Stick to the fundamentals. Yeah.
Vinod?
Yeah, I would say that build your own plan. These plans are not available in the market at a discounted price. That's not possible. The only thing is you can do is just build your own plan, monitor it, change it, update it, keep it alive, and work with your partners. That's all.
Bharat?
Yeah, so I would urge most of the companies to leverage the low-hanging fruits, right? So coming back to what you had told that time, right? For the infrastructure management, they can for the demand forecasting as well as for the predictive maintenances, where a lot of AI ML algorithms can be used, right, to optimize your spend, everything, right? So utilize that, leverage that, start with small, like someone just said in the earlier, right? And then you can progressively over time increment it and then adopt it for your entire infrastructure. So yeah, that would be the closing remark.
Finally, Vasudev.
I think we need to be customer and business focused.
Yeah, sorry, Vasudev, we missed you.
Really sorry. I think we need to be customer and business focused. That's important. I mean, all the decisions that we do has to be customer focused. It has to make sure that the customer gets the best experience. The latencies are not there. The minimal latencies are there. The business continuity is taken care of. The overall cost to acquire a customer is low. That's what we need to be focused on. The engineering cannot survive without business. It has to be business focused.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I think very fascinating points that all of you made towards the end, sort of timeless principles. I would go through them again and repeat them for myself. A really interesting session, thoroughly enjoyed it. Amazing perspectives that all of you shared. Thank you so much once again for taking out time out of your busy schedules for this particular initiative. It was a pleasure for me to be the moderator. Thank you so much. Over to you, Isha.
Thank you.